Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, today we're peeling back the layers on something, well, incredibly intimate and often kind of whispered about. We're talking about the intricate dance of sexual desire in relationships, particularly within marriage. We've taken a deep dive into a professional guide that really sheds light on why desire can ebb and flow, and maybe more importantly, how it can be powerfully reignited.
That's right. Our mission today is, to distill the most impactful knowledge from this material. We want to offer you some surprising insights, maybe some practical wisdom, whether you're looking to understand your own relationship better, or maybe you're just intensely curious about the whole human experience. We're here to help connect those dots.
Yeah, and we'll navigate these sensitive topics with hopefully both clarity and, a touch of humor. We want to ensure you walk away feeling well informed and perhaps a little enlightened. So let's just jump right in. So, to kick things off, our sources highlight what they cleverly call wedding kick and other anti-aphrodisiacs. Basically, those early marital dynamics that can subtly, almost sneakily begin to erode intimacy. It's rarely one big dramatic event, is it?
No, exactly. It's much more like a gradual, almost imperceptible shift. And what's particularly insightful here is this concept they call mergers and acquisitions. I mean, think about it. We often enter a marriage seeking this profound closeness, right? To truly merge with another person to love and be loved. But at the exact same time, we fiercely want to retain our individual identity, our sense of self. That tension, this kind of tug of war, it lies in securely connecting without feeling completely subsumed. We need enough personal space, enough separateness to feel like we can breathe, to pursue our own purpose, make our own decisions, while still deeply valuing our partner. It's a really delicate balance.
Oh, that dynamic is so relatable. It really is. I'm thinking of Cheryl and Sam's story from the source material. Cheryl, who'd been in a more, let's say, distant companionship before, she was initially kind of taken aback by Sam's intense desire to know all of her, not just physically, but her mind, her thoughts. But interestingly, ultimately, that deeper emotional intimacy, that genuine pursuit of her inner world, that's what truly drew her in. It just goes to show how nuanced this need for both closeness and individual space can be. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, in your own intimate relationships, do you tend to lean more towards pursuing connection, or do you maybe find yourself needing a bit more distance for that emotional closeness to really thrive?
Okay, so beyond those emotional complexities, our sources reveal another incredibly common culprit in fading desire. And they've dubbed this one the chore wars. This is where, what was once shared pleasure can start to feel like, well, just another item on an endless to-do list. And it's especially poignant, the sources say, for mothers who are often touched out.
Ah, yes, touched out. Meaning they've experienced so much physical contact and emotional demands from their children all day
Yeah.
that they're just physically and emotionally depleted, craving personal space,
Yeah.
a break from needing to give.
It's such a powerful point.
Mm.
Our sources really highlight that for many young women, desire essentially what it grounds in this swamp of resentment over an unequal division of household labor and childcare. As Gina Ogden, leading expert in women's sexual health, famously put it, and this is great, a lot of women don't need more foreplay, they just need fair play,
Fair play. I like that.
right? And sharing life's load. That needs to happen for desire to even begin to return. It's often that foundational inequity that just stifles the erotic connection.
The story of Audrey really brings this home, doesn't it? She was caught in this cycle of martyrdom, constantly reasoning and nagging Daniel about household tasks, but without ever truly confronting the underlying imbalance. And her libido just went dormant, and our source connects this back to her own childhood trauma, making her anxious about reenacting it. Plus, Daniel's upbringing, where his mother apparently spoiled him after his father left. It's a tangled web.
It really is. And what's insightful here is how a father's active role, providing that kind of protective and supportive structure around the mother-child unit, it directly impacts the mother's capacity to broaden her focus beyond just basic caregiving and actually maintain intimacy. Now, when both partners actively work together, obviously that's most effective. But the source notes that even one partner making a conscious shift in their role can lead to real improvement. So for you listening, maybe consider this. What would it look like to honestly list all the household chores you manage, assign a realistic time frame to each, and then open a discussion with your partner about a truly fair arrangement? And critically, are you carving out a block of uninterrupted time each week just for your own personal development or rest? That dedicated me time,
Right.
that, plus maybe a non-negotiable weekly date night, they can be surprisingly potent aphrodisiacs.
Hmm. Okay, so while external pressures like household burdens clearly impact desire, our sources also reveal how internal narratives and even physiological understandings can create surprising barriers. Which brings us to a surprisingly common misconception, the elusive orgasm, or as our sources call it, the big elusive O. And here's something I found truly eye opening, almost a biological marvel, really. Only women's bodies have an organ, the clitoris, that is devoted exclusively to pleasure. Our capacity for orgasm begins in the womb, apparently, and typically lasts a lifetime. Get this, some women can even have orgasms just by thinking about sex. It's fascinating, isn't it? And what's truly interesting here is how often a singular focus on intercourse can actually become an anti-aphrodisiac.
Hmm.
When other forms of pleasuring are just labeled foreplay, it sort of implies they're merely a prelude to the real thing. It diminishes their intrinsic erotic value. And this puts immense pressure on both partners, actually. For men, it can create performance anxiety, maybe contributing to distress around erectile dysfunction later in life. And for women, it can lead to feeling unseen or unheard in their unique paths to pleasure.
Right. Sarah's story is such a classic illustration of this. She struggled to have orgasms, which left her partner Terry feeling inadequate. So their sex life devolved into these brief quickies, sometimes as short as 5 minutes total, with basically no foreplay. And when he'd immediately touch her vulva with no buildup, she felt, well, nothing. Plus, she had this ingrained belief that orgasms were best when he's inside. But our sources emphatically say, not necessarily. Indeed, not necessarily at all. Many women report that clitoral stimulation produces their most profound orgasms, and intercourse alone might or might not lead to climax for them. The advice from our source for what they call the biggest orgasm is get ready for this, a huge amount of clitoral stimulation for 15-20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So while the idea of simultaneous orgasm can be glorious, maybe focusing on the individual satisfaction and the shared closeness of both lovers is a more immediate and frankly achievable goal. The deeper insight here, really, is to question those preconceived notions that might be limiting your erotic potential. Remember that pleasure is diverse, it's not monolithic.
Speaking of preconceived notions, sometimes the sticking point isn't if sex happens, but how. Our sources dive into what they call kiss what, conflicts over specific acts, like oral sex. And the experts note it can feel exquisite to both genders, barring, and this is key, barring preconceived feelings that get in the way.
Absolutely. Hannah's story perfectly illustrates this point. She had a strong aversion, disliked the smell, the taste, had a sensitive gag reflex, and she associated it with skanky girls from porn, deeming it sort of base. Now, for many men, this feels like a core rejection of a fundamental desire, almost a meat and potatoes need, not some exotic dessert. The depth of a partner's feelings on this particular issue is incredibly crucial for motivating any change. It often touches on identity and acceptance, way beyond just preference.
Hmm. And Renee's experience highlights the powerful grip of inhibition, too. She actually enjoyed oral sex when she was younger and less inhibited, often, the source notes, under the influence of alcohol. But later, her anxiety centered on cleanliness, smell, and taste, similar to Hannah. This really invites us to consider, doesn't it? What anxieties might be settling into a rigid, almost concrete-like form in your own intimate life, limiting exploration or enjoyment?
It's a fantastic question.
Hmm.
And the sources emphasize that specific, direct, intimate feedback is absolutely vital here. Non-judgmental feedback. Women are the experts on what feels good to their own bodies, period. In Renee's case, her husband, Andrew, would apparently vigorously suck her clitoris as she approached orgasm, actually hurting her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he dismissed her comments, saying she was just too sensitive. This reveals a critical lack of understanding that, a woman's genitals change daily due to hormones, energy levels, even clothing choices. A partner can always become more expert through receptive feedback. Always. And that, in turn, can significantly increase desire for acts like oral sex. This isn't about personal failure. It's about mutual learning, adaptability, and ultimately deep connection.
That's a great point. And it segues nicely into our next kind of profound area. Our sources strongly emphasize that our exuberance or lack thereof about sex is this powerful, often unspoken legacy from our family of origin. A difficult or lonely childhood, for instance, can surprisingly kill sexual passion in adulthood. It seems counterintuitive, but it happens.
It's so true. Parents might not be intentionally cruel, but benign neglect. Focusing primarily on good behavior rather than genuine relational enjoyment, or maybe just grappling with their own inadequacies, like a sick or depressed mother or exhausted older parents, that can wound a child. Children might be given toys and entertainment instead of the time and attentive presence they actually need. And culturally, there's often this deeply ingrained belief that girls do not and should not own their own desire. They're frequently taught that sex is their enemy, only permissible as an expression of love, never as lust or desire for its own sake.
Ah,
This shapes our adult sexuality profoundly, often without us realizing it.
Bianca's story is such a stark example of this. Her completely shut down libido was directly connected to her alcoholic mother. In her family, the unwritten rules were don't talk, don't feel, and don't trust. Plus, her mother's inappropriate flirting created this weird sense of competition, making Bianca avoid dating. She said flirting felt dirty. She worried constantly about becoming a slut, making it nearly impossible for her to celebrate the genuine joy and desire she found in her husband.
Yeah. A childhood disrupted by chaos or addiction can indeed result in profoundly disrupted adult sexuality. Parents in those environments often just don't have the emotional energy to nurture children in ways that make intimate relationships feel natural and safe later on. Staying erotic in a lifelong relationship demands the ability to risk, to let go, which is incredibly hard when letting go meant chaos and vulnerability in childhood. It makes you reflect, doesn't it? Like, what were the overt and maybe the covert messages about sexuality you received growing up? How is physical touch handled in your family? And perhaps most tellingly, what do you wish you had known at the time of your very first sexual experience?
Hmm. Sometimes, though, making peace with aversion involves confronting something even deeper, past trauma. Our sources explain that offenders often treat victims as sexual objects. Tragically, this can lead victims to internalize sex as a commodity, maybe use it primarily to please others, or even to reenact the trauma through promiscuity, which is often shame-filled and robotic, or conversely, by shutting down their libido entirely as a protective mechanism.
Sigrid's story powerfully highlights this. She had a strong aversion to male genitals, finding them ugly. She recalled an old dread seeing those huge penises, which for her translated to huge demand. Her early positive sexual sensations during childhood abuse became inextricably intertwined with later repulsion and profound guilt. The ability to feel aroused while simultaneously feeling dirty or guilty. That can be deeply confusing and often leads to a complete shutdown of desire. The insight here is how our past can literally reprogram our bodies and minds regarding pleasure.
That's incredibly complex. How do we even begin to unpack such deeply ingrained emotional responses? Sigrid, in her journey, found immense relief in reframing her husband's erections. She even playfully started calling his penis Big Red and came to this crucial realization. He didn't expect sex every single time he had an erection. That was huge for her. So for you, listening, this invites the question, are there any past wounds from developmental milestones that remain unresolved, especially if your low libido seems accompanied by persistent depression? Worth exploring. Okay, now moving to another common hurdle that our sources highlight, one that often plays out in the Better Men Beyond, the dreaded feeling of, does this bed make me look fat? The sources state quite directly that no other aspect of attractiveness interferes with women's libido as much as feeling overweight before sex. Though interestingly, this insecurity often doesn't interfere once sex is actually happening. It's the anticipation, the perception.
It's a powerful observation. And let's be real, weight is undeniably entwined with sexual attractiveness in our culture, and the judgment towards women of larger sizes is often exceptionally harsh. This can unfortunately lead to a vicious cycle, where emotional fury, maybe at one's body, maybe at a partner, makes one want to eat more. Emily's story perfectly illustrated this. Her anger at her husband, for past rejection, actually fueled her eating habits. Now, our source offered a truly fascinating and maybe counterintuitive suggestion to Emily to intentionally start masturbating again.
Really?
Yeah, not as a replacement for partner sex, but to regain a sense of control over giving herself pleasurable feelings. This helped to offset the deprivation she felt from her diet. This act of self-pleasure helps rebuild self-confidence, which is such a key ingredient for ongoing sensual exchange with a partner.
And then there's Alita, who actually told her husband Enrico, I am too fat now for loving, despite his evident compassion and continued attraction to her. This just highlights how deeply ingrained these self-perceptions can be, regardless of external validation. The powerful insight here seems to be that personal integrity and truly being okay with your body for yourself can be a far more potent aphrodisiac than any external standard of beauty.
Absolutely. And on the topic of physical shifts, menopause is another significant life change that profoundly impacts desire. Our sources detail symptoms like hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, and unfortunately that pervasive cultural image of the crone can greatly impact a woman's self-image and sense of desirability.
Oh, absolutely. Those hormonal changes must be incredibly impactful.
They really are. Reduced estrogen and testosterone directly affect libido and vaginal tissue health. And it's easy for men to misread a lack of initial arousal or wetness as disinterest, just as women can sometimes misread erectile dysfunction as a lack of attraction. Misunderstandings abound. Now, while hormone therapy, including bioidentical estrogens and testosterone, can certainly help many women, our sources also emphasize the power of non-hormonal approaches. Things like limiting caffeine, embracing a healthful diet, increasing omega-3s, avoiding spicy foods, alcohol, tobacco. And crucially, vaginal estrogen and just simple artificial lubricants can be easily worked into intimate routines, often with immediate benefits. The key insight here is that understanding and addressing the physiological changes is really a shared responsibility, not some kind of personal failing.
Louisa's story really encapsulates a common dynamic here, too. She desired petting and non-intercourse physical affection, but her husband would get aroused and immediately expect full intercourse. So she just forgot all of it, her words, to avoid the pressure. She felt that being demanding of her own needs was somehow unfeminine, and this led to a painful standoff where she withheld what he wanted due to her building resentment.
hmm And for women experiencing pain or difficulty with penetration, vaginal rehabilitation is absolutely crucial. This isn't talked about enough. This can involve working with a physical therapist specializing in pelvic floor health, learning to relax specific muscles, maybe taking temporary breaks from intercourse, and regularly achieving orgasms through clitoral stimulation using vibration if needed. That can help blood flow. It also includes using things like vaginal dilators, lubricants, and even certain creams under a doctor's supervision to increase blood flow and tissue health. For couples, it might mean creatively adapting positions or even, perhaps most challenging, grieving the loss of certain types of intimacy and embracing new forms. It requires communication and flexibility. Oh, and our source highlights one fascinating technique, playfully called sexual baseball.
Sexual baseball, okay, intrigued.
Right. The idea is partner stop stimulation just short of orgasm twice, then allow climax on the third strike. It apparently extends love play, builds anticipation, and increases focus on shared pleasure rather than just the end goal. The insight is that adaptability and creative problem solving are just as vital as any physical intervention.
Okay. Now, shifting gears to perhaps the most devastating blow a marriage can endure, infidelity. Our sources emphasize that nothing slams the heart and body closed quite like betrayal. It often leaves the betrayed partner feeling utterly lost, devalued. That heart-wrenching cry, "How could I have meant so little to you?" It just echoes through so many of these stories.
It's brutal. Franny and John's story is a really powerful example of the arduous path to recovery. Franny initially demanded every single erotic detail, which, while driven by understandable need for truth, actually traumatized her further and caused agonizing flashbacks. So while transparency is undoubtedly crucial for rebuilding trust, the source insightfully suggests giving only a rough outline in the beginning. Save the finer, potentially more painful points for discussion in the presence of a skilled therapist. The involved spouse should absolutely offer passwords, allow access to communications to rebuild trust, yes. But critically, the injured spouse should also try to set a limited daily time frame for discussing the affair. This helps avoid obsessive analysis and actually allows space for healing.
What's truly thought-provoking, though, and something I found quite surprising in the sources, is that Franny later came to understand that John's affair wasn't just about her. It was also a reflection of his own struggles and a profound, maybe misguided desire for someone who simply listened to him. And our sources provocatively state this: sex after an affair can be the hottest sex of a person's life. That's a powerful, almost controversial statement after such immense pain. How? How did the sources reconcile that potential for new intimacy with the profound devastation of betrayal?
It's a profound question, isn't it? And the insight, I think, lies in the sheer vulnerability and the renewed, maybe even desperate commitment that can emerge from such a crisis. When a couple chooses to do the incredibly hard, painful work of addressing the affair, it forces a level of honesty, a raw emotional connection that might have been missing for years. The hottest sex isn't really about the affair itself, obviously. It's about the profound rediscovery of each other through the ashes of betrayal. It's about the radical honesty, the commitment to repair, the terrifying realization of what could have been lost. It's really a testament to the human capacity for healing and growth, even in the deepest wounds. Not guaranteed, but possible.
Wow. Okay. Finally, sometimes our relationships feel, well, haunted by ghosts from the past. Whether they're parents, former lovers, even coaches, apparently. Carrie and Patrick's story powerfully illustrates this. Their current struggles were just mired in unresolved issues from their respective family histories, leading Carrie to progressively close off her heart and subsequently her body.
Yeah. And our sources consistently stress that for most women, something soulful, a deep emotional connection, is foundational to feeling sexual. It's often a prerequisite. Patrick argued for the necessity of sexual connection to feel close, while Carrie desperately needed emotional connection before she could even begin to feel sexual again. A classic standoff. He eventually felt, he had nothing left to fight for. This raises a crucial question for all of us listening. Are the underlying issues that surface in your casual arguments actually the same core conflicts that erupt in your most intense ones? The pattern often reveals the deeper ghosts at play, if you look closely.
Hmm. And a key communication technique for navigating these tough conversations and conflicts, which our sources really champion, is simple but powerful. Pivot to listening. After you've clearly stated your own feelings using I statements, hopefully immediately pivot and ask, what do you think about this situation? Or tell me what you see here. This isn't just about being polite. It fundamentally communicates that you understand there are always two sides to every story. And that dramatically reduces defensiveness and opens up space for genuine understanding. It's a small shift with a potentially massive impact. So, after all that, what does this all mean for you? We've taken a really deep dive into the intricate layers of sexual desire, haven't we? From those subtle relational tug-of-wars, the resentment sparked by chore battles, all the way to the powerful, often unconscious messages from childhood, the impact of physical changes like menopause, and the profound healing journey after trauma or infidelity. What really stands out time and again is that low libido is rarely the core problem itself. It's usually not. Instead, it's often a symptom, right? A kind of warning sign from our heart of hearts, signaling deeper relational or personal issues that need attention.
That's the critical takeaway, I think. If sex is, in essence, a private marker for how things are truly going in your relationship, then what is your body telling you right now? The path to greater happiness and sexual satisfaction often involves, let's be honest, courageously confronting discomfort and fear. And crucially, having the courage to seek help, whether that's through improved communication, addressing unresolved past wounds, or pursuing professional medical and therapeutic expertise. The wonderful news is there's almost always a path out. There's a path to greater happiness and sexual satisfaction, even if it feels completely hidden at first.
Absolutely. We truly hope this deep dive has given you powerful new insights, maybe a renewed sense of possibility. Remember, the unexpected thing about changing our sex lives is that we often end up changing our lives in many, many other profound ways. It ripples outward. So as you reflect on today's conversation, what's one insight that particularly resonated with you? And what might you want to explore on your own after hearing these perspectives? Something to think about.